How's it going, guys, and welcome back to yet another Wizard101 video. I'm your host, TheFatRat, and today I'm going to be discussing for yet another guide within Wizard101 that will be worth of value to everyone here. So, for those who don't know, within this current update, you are now able to craft the new Grizzleheim lore spells. You can also get them from lore as well, but specifically this guide is going to be about the crafting portion. And for those who just want to get my brief opinions on these spells, I did have a video where I talk about these spells, and I think the only thing that changed was Hammer of Thor, but pretty much most of what's in these craftable spells are for the most part the same. And if you just want to get a summary of my opinions on them, I think that Grendel's Immense is pretty good for lower level PvP in terms of legendary. I'm not sure if there's any use for it in terms of max level PvP in my honest opinion, but it definitely is very worth in legendary. I think Ratatouille Score Spin is great for everything, especially in PvE. Definitely a well-deserved spell for life wizards. And for Hammer of Thor, it's a very great spell for almost any kind of level. It's definitely probably the best E-free counter, or nowadays, E-free and a King Artorias counter, because King Artorias now has a -45 weakness, which definitely is very hefty. So having spells such as Hammer of Thor could definitely help storm wizards in many of those situations. But pretty much for this video, I'm going to go in a brief summary as to where exactly you can get these recipes and what exactly these recipes require. I'll be going more in terms of depth on the reagents that are necessary in order to craft these recipes, and finally just give my final thoughts in terms on the difficulty on every single recipe that is going to be shown today. So without further ado, let's get started. For those who are new to this game and probably don't know as to where to get these recipes, in order to get these recipes, you must go to Dunskate's Sigil, located within Avalon's the Weird, and you must interact with the NPC named Grady. In order to unlock Grady, if I remember correctly, you have to fight the boss that resides there in order to either unlock the NPC or not get pulled from the boss itself. And once you defeat it once, you should be just fine. And as for the prices of the recipes, just make sure you have at the very least 12k gold for your specific spell. Now, to obtain the TCs for all these spells, you can actually have two methods. You can either farm lore for those TCs, which you can also get the spell at the same time, or you can spend a little bit of money on the Grizzleheim lore packs, which not only does it drop the TCs, but it also drops some of the reagents that you will need to craft those specific spells. We'll start the guide with the first spell being from my main school, the Myth School, which is Grendel's Immense. In order to craft Grendel's Immense, we'll require the following: 10 Grendel's Immense TC, 120 Perfect Jade, 200 Perfect Sapphire, 60 Shell, 50 Flying Squid Ink, 150 Diamond, 220 Cactus, and finally 25 Amber. In terms of the reagents, in order to obtain Perfect Jade and Perfect Sapphire, you have to interact with Archeatus in the Celestia base camp, who is the reagent vendor in Celestia. In order to obtain Shell, you can do two different methods, either by gardening or crafting, which is essentially, in this case, transmuting. Now, the gardening option is through Fickle Pickle. This plant can be purchased by Farley in Golem Court, each of them costing 2,400 gold. In order to plant this plant, you must become a rank 5 gardener. The other method, which is transmuting, will require for you to become an adept crafter. In order to obtain the quest to become an adept crafter, you must interact with Toshio, located in Mushu. The recipe will be sold by Avery Templeton, located in Celestia base camp. In terms of the reagent Flying Squid Ink, the best method in my opinion is by farming the secret tunnel, which is located in Imperia's area jungle. As for Diamond, I have 3 different methods in order for you to obtain this specific reagent. It is fairly rare, but it is in ways fairly easy to obtain them. You can either get it through King Parsley, you can get them through Fickle Pickle, or you can get them by transmuting. since we already talked about Fickle Puckle, let's talk a little bit about King Parsley. Now, unfortunately, King Parsley is a crowns plant. Yes, it can be dropped by various different mobs and bosses. The only problem is that since they have such a large reward pool, more than likely you're not really going to be getting one as easily. So if I were to recommend anything, you can at the very least buy at least one King Parsley plant. Each of them costs 750 crowns each, or you can get them when they're on sale, which is also a really good way to do it. And the great thing about this plant is that they reseed before elders, so you really only just need to purchase one, and the more you keep harvesting that specific plant, the more likely you can get yourself a 69 plot of King Parsley alone. In order to plant King Parsley, one must become a rank 3 gardener. The other method, which is by transmuting, will require you to become an apprentice crafter, which you can obtain the quest to become an apprentice crafter by interacting with Wu Yam, located in Crocotopia. The recipe once again will be sold by Avery Templeton in Celestia Base Camp. Cactail is actually surprisingly a pretty easy reagent to obtain. There's various ways you can actually obtain Cactail, but in my opinion, one of the best methods definitely has to be by planting pink dandelions. Now yes, pink dandelions are a crowns plant, but the great thing about pink dandelions is that not only can you start planting them right when you finally finish your gardening quest, which will automatically make you rank 1 gardener, but you can also get them pretty easily by questing through Crocotopia. The other great thing about pink dandelions is that they also like to give pretty rare reagents, including black pearls and blood moss, which can also be sold for quite a bit. So it's a decent gardening source and a reagent source. And with the final reagent being amber, in my opinion, the best ways to obtain amber is through Cronus, Gladiator, or the King Parsley plant itself. Now, in my opinion, this is also the rarest reagent to obtain, if not the hardest reagent to obtain. And in terms of Cronus and Gladiator, they're both located in Cyclops Lane's Aquila, and can be accessed by pretty much anyone. Cronus is the secret boss inside Tartarus, while Gladiator is the secret boss inside of Mount Olympus. The thing about King Parsley is that there's actually 2 different versions of King Parsley. There's a regular version and then there's the ultra version. Now the only really difference between the two, other than the fact that one also tends to give some pretty rare treasure cards and maybe some rank 8 snacks, is that in terms of the amber drop rates, Ultra King Parsley has better amber drop rates compared to the regular King Parsley, but both can still drop amber at a specific point in time. My recommendation really is just get regular King Parsley, since they do have a chance of dropping Ultra King Parsley, and when you get Ultra King Parsley you can just plant those right then and there. So pretty much you shouldn't really have too much of a problem in terms of the King Parsleys in obtaining either the Ultra or the regular. The only issue here is the RNG with Amber. The next spell we'll be going over is Hammer of Thor, which is Storm's new spell. In order to craft Hammer of Thor, we'll require the following: 10 Hammer of Thor TC, 120 Perfect Amethyst, 200 Simple Vial, 60 Comet Cell, 40 Silver, 60 Scrap Iron, 50 Sunstone, and 25 Amber. To obtain Perfect Amethyst, you can interact with Archaeodis located in Celestia Base Camp, while for Simple Vial, you can interact with Alsaf 1 located in Crocotopia's The Oasis. He's the reagent vendor in Crocotopia. In terms of Comet Cell, I honestly believe that this is a surprisingly pretty easy reagent to obtain. In order to obtain this reagent, generally is by interaction within Chrysalis Part 2 mainly, but you can also interact with this reagent in lots of places in Imperia. The second reagent to obtain, which I believe is likely one of the harder reagents to obtain, would be Silver, which there's only 3 methods in order for you to obtain them. Each method isn't necessarily the greatest, mainly because of the fact that it's not necessarily great for everyone. Jewel Star Blossoms is definitely one of the best ways in my opinion, and the only problem that I have with Jewel Star Blossoms is that there's only one way to obtain them, and it's usually through packs. So the 2 packs that you can actually get them from is both the Farley's Gardening Pack or the Safari Pack. And you have to remember, it's a chance to obtain these blossoms. You don't really get them guaranteed. Now, the great thing about the Farley's pack is you can actually obtain them through free-to-play methods in a way by doing, I believe, the Decathlon, and also I believe Beastmoon tends to have that as a reward. And if I'm not wrong, maybe the Scroll of Fortune probably has one of them as a reward, so you should be fine for the most part in terms of attaining the Farley's Gardening Pack in a way, but once again, it is a RNG chance, so more than likely you won't be able to get them unless you spend a little bit of money. Now, the great thing about Star Jewel Blossoms, however, is that they have a chance to reseed a different plant other than itself. So for example, it can give the Star Blossom at Elder, but it can also give a Circle Blossom, or a Tear Blossom, or a Triangle Blossom. So it's definitely really good because you can actually get a lot more reagents and you can get a lot more different jewels. So it's a good plant, but at the end of the day, more than likely this is like a premium, paying option. And the last way is by Brandon Mistborn. He is the ticket vendor located in Unicorn Way. The only thing that I don't necessarily like about this method, me as a PvPer, it's great. You could just do tournaments and get lots of tickets for it to get some silver. But the only problem is that not everyone is necessarily PvPers. So in reality, if you're just mainly a PvE person, your only two methods is generally just the Bazaar or the Star Blossom plants. And you don't really have the third option as a thing for lots of people who just tend to do PvE and nothing else. Now, the next reagent will be Scrap Iron, which surprisingly, it's actually pretty easy to obtain this because you can actually just go to Marleybone. There's definitely lots of locations for you to obtain Scrap Iron. One of the most popular locations is through Chelsea Court, and the other great method is by getting Evil Magma Peas, which is a Mega Snack plant specifically, but it's a Mega Snack plant that likes to give some pretty good TC and some really good reagents. Now, one thing I like to say about Evil Magma Peas, other than the fact that it is a Mega Snack plant, is that you can actually get them through various locations, and I will have a guide soon about these plants specifically in the future, but there's various locations you can obtain them. The only thing is that their drop chance isn't necessarily the greatest, but at the very least nowadays, it's a lot easier to obtain them more than ever. And in order to plant Evil Magma Peas, you must be a rank 4 gardener. Sunstone is another reagent that you can get it through lots of pretty good methods actually. You can actually get them through either Diego, the Duel Master, you can get them through Fickle Pickle, Evil Magma Peas, or by Transmuting. Now, like I said before, with Silver, not everyone's going to be able to do Diego, mainly because not everyone PvPs, but if you guys are interested, each Sunstone is 200 arena tickets per reagent. The last method is by Transmuting. Now, in order to obtain the recipe, you must become an Adept Crafter, and to get the Adept Crafter quest, you have to interact with Toshio once again in Mushu. As to obtain the recipe, once again, it is purchased by Avery Templeton, located in Celestia Base Camp. And finally for Amber, my recommendation is either Plant King Parsley, Farm Cronus, or Gladiator. The last spell I'll be going over is Ratatouille's Spin, which is Life's new AoE spell, which in my opinion, they definitely deserve this spell. And with the requirements will be as follows: 10 Ratatouille's Spin TC, 120 Patriot, 200 Black Coal, 150 Agave Nectar, 45 Nickel, 225 Iron, 25 Frost Flower, and finally, 25 Amber. Now, to obtain both the Patriot and Black Coal, you can actually purchase this by interacting with Allsoft1 in Crocotopia's The Oasis, but you can also obtain it by interacting with the reagent vendor that's located in Wizard City's Old Town. Now, this is where crafting the spell becomes a problem. Now, for this reagent, Agave Nectar, you can actually get it through two various ways, one of which is applicable to anyone, which is by interacting with agave leaves that are located in Mangrove Marsh. It gives you a chance to get Agave Nectar. Now, the transmuting option is one that's not necessarily available to everyone. The reason for this is, let's say you're a legendary wizard and you want to craft the spell. Now, in order to obtain the recipe, the only way is by unlocking Popum, the white paper, who's located in Azteca's Alto. Now, the quest to complete this is a main story quest called Bookkeeper, which is quest 110 out of 197, meaning that you have to finish a little slightly more than half of Azteca, which is way over the level 60 level if you wanted to do level 60 PvP. And for those who are interested, let's say if you are a max level, then in order to obtain the recipe, you must have the minimum rank of Grandmaster Artisan. And in order to get Grandmaster Artisan, you must interact with Pure Stanson, located in Celestia's The Floating Land. The next two reagents will include nickel and iron. Now, the only problem with these two reagents is that they're specifically jewel reagents, which you can only really get them to two various methods. One is from jewel plants, and the other is through transmuting. For both nickel and iron, you can also fish for them, but the only problem with this is that such an abundance amounts of fishing sources for these two reagents can also mean that you may not likely get them that often, only because generally chests tend to have a pretty big pool overall. Now, in terms of the transmutes, however, if you're interested, in order to get the transmute for nickel, you must interact with Torald Wayfinder, located in Grizzleheim's The Northgard, and to obtain this recipe, you must be at least an apprentice crafter. In order to obtain Apprentice Crafter, you can interact with Wool Yam, located in Krakotopia. As for iron, you can actually get the recipe by the same person in Northgard, and the requirement is actually becoming a Novice Crafter, which you can actually obtain this by interacting with Adora Tangletree, located in Wizard City. And finally, with the last two reagents, to get Frost Flower, in my opinion, best way is probably through planting Fickle Pickle, and for Amber, like we mentioned before, it's either Gardening King Parsley, Farming Cronus, or Gladiator. And that concludes today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy this and found this very informative. There are a few things that I wanted to note before I end off this video, but I also wanted to ask a favor from you guys. The favor basically being that if I missed a few things in terms of how to get certain reagents to ease crafting on all of these recipes, let me know down in the comments. But other than that, the few things I did want to note is about, in my opinion, what's the easiest and what's the hardest recipe to craft for these spells. Now, in my opinion, the easiest recipe probably has to go towards Grendel's Lament, because the only thing you really have to worry about is Flying Squid Ink. And the thing about Flying Squid Ink is, at the very least, the secret tunnels are portable by anyone. You just need someone who has access to secret tunnels. So if you're able to do some runs with them, it should be just fine. And I think that there is an Imperia bundle house that I'm very certain if you were to fish over there, you might be able to get a decent amount of Flying Squid Ink that way. So there's at least pretty good methods in order to obtain Flying Squid Ink. And it's also the cheapest of the three recipes, going at around 510k gold. As for the hardest recipe, I'll probably give that to Ratatouille Spin. The main reason for this is because there's two reagents that are specifically jewel reagents, where the best method in reality is through a blossom plant, which is kind of like a premium option, and you can farm for them, but I'm pretty sure with lots of mobs or specific bosses that might drop these specific reagents, they probably have like a really big reward pool, making it almost not necessarily impossible, but it will take very long amounts of time in order for you to get those specific reagents that way. Agave Nectar is also another issue with this spell, because there's only really just one universal way in order to obtain them, and it's by interacting. The other method is really just access to people who are beyond the legendary level. So like usually at legendary, you should be able to craft spells from lore, but in terms of Ratatouille Spin, I mean, you'll still be able to. The only issue is that you can't necessarily get the transmute recipe until after you pretty much are way above level 60. So that's part of the reason why I think Ratatouille Spin is likely the hardest to craft. And they're also in high amounts as well, making it also the most expensive of the three recipes at around 710k gold. But I'll leave it at that. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't. Also make sure to turn on bell notifications for more Wizard101 content coming soon in the future. And as always, remember to stay frenzied. Peace!